having such a massive moon-shaped head is I can never really work out how to get it in the frame properly. Oh, bleatings everyone! I'm doing a little update of my Read What You Own challenge that I've been on since the start of the year. So I'm trying to read 100 books from books that I currently own before I acquire any new ones, and it's going really well. So I have 9 books to talk to you about today. Some little overviews for you of what I have enjoyed over the last few weeks, but before we get into that, I have some new books to show you. I can't stress enough how I haven't cheated my Read What You Own challenge. I really haven't, because firstly, I didn't know that this book was arriving, okay? This was a surprise and it was gifted to me by the author, so there's just no way I could have known, okay? Now, I am going to finish my challenge before I read this, but I cannot wait to read it. It's top of my list for when I'm done. And this is For Every Evil by SQ McGrath. I am really excited because I love SQ McGrath's writing, and I thought that I'd gone ahead and bought everything that she's released, but I haven't. I was missing a few things, but sorry, I've got 2 incense sticks burning right now, and that might have been too many for such a small room. Anyway, yes, if you see this, Sarah, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Was so kind of you, and she didn't even ask for a review or anything. She just sent this as a present, as a thank you for all the reviewing I've done for her so far. I mean, I will of course be reviewing it because I review everything I read. It's sort of a compulsion, and I'm sure I'm going to have loads of like cool things to say about this. So I'm going to just quickly read you the back. 3 families bound by dark history, twisted in a generational curse whose roots are watered in blood. Elena Flores, I think I've pronounced that correctly, moves to a place beginning with S in Louisiana that I can't pronounce either. A small town off the... Oh, Sarah, you've done this on purpose. Off the Atchafalaya. Elena moves to Louisiana, a small town off a river, in hope of a better life, but once she's arrived, her son vanishes. Kim St. James, mourning the disappearance of her little sister, is shortly after accused of brutally murdering her brother. David LeBlanc, who has lost his wife and children, is certain that violence is his only release. Whatever hunts for vengeance in the dark waters of the bayou shows no mercy, for the sins of the father must be requited in full. Requited? I butchered that, really sorry about that, but I'm really excited. So something that I know this author's work for is, firstly, excellent characters. Her plots are really tight, which is amusing to me because I interviewed her. I will include the link for that in the description if you wanted to check that out. When I spoke with her, she told me that she's a pantser, which means that she doesn't outline her novels and things like that, and very often, you know, writes herself into corners, or she hits a certain point and then thinks, oh no, what do I do now? But you would never know that from reading her work, because she always has all of these threads that seem unconnected, or like they seem like unimportant, well, not unimportant to the story, but like things that sometimes just seem like a character detail will turn out to be like the crux of something that happens in the 3rd act. She's really good at weaving narratives together like this, and her writing style and everything just really appeals to me. So I absolutely love her, and she's one of my favorite authors. So I'm really excited, and thanks again, Sarah, if you see this. I really appreciate it. Those are flies, I think, on the cover. It's black and white, so I think those are flies. I do not like flies. And this one doesn't count because this is a book that I'm in. I have a story in this. This is Creature Feature Classics Volume 1, Lycanthropy, edited by Annie Knox, and this is from Annie's press, which she launched last year, Snakebite. Hang on, let me just make sure. Yeah, Snakebite Books. Now, I was confused initially because there was another press called Snakebite, and I don't know if it's still running. I'm going to have to check, but don't confuse that one with this one. This is a new press, and I think that this is the first book that Annie Knox has actually put out from the press. So I could be wrong on that. I'll double check, but I will put links for the press or Annie's information in the description anyway. But yeah, well, my whole life has been about werewolves the last few months. You might already know I co-edited a book called Strange New Moons with Stephen Kozanowski. I'm really proud to be a part of this. Annie Knox is a really good writer, and she's cover art and illustrations by Steve Penfold. I just wanted to give credit to the the artist there because it's wonderful. And there are also illustrations like inside the book as well to sort of punctuate each each separate story. So what was I saying? Addie Docks, she's really talented, a talented writer, good ideas, and she's I've worked on a couple of things with her now, and I'm just so impressed by her skill as an author. But she's also a really nice person, and she's really creatively ambitious and with the press and everything. So I hope I'm going to get to work with her a lot more, a little bit more down the line. I think that she's a talent, and I think that everyone's going to know who she is in, you know, the next couple of years certainly. So I'm really excited to see how things take off for her. Any Gilmore Girls fans in my comments? Nothing to do with the video, just want to know, why did you drop out of Yale? Anyway, let's get on to the books that I've read then. I've made a little list. So now here's where we are number wise for reading 100 books before I get any more. I'm on number 35, so I read 35 out of 100. What have I read? So first up, we're gonna go, I've got some short story collections, some non-fiction for a change, and I've also got a novel. So we'll do the short story collections first. I'm going to timestamp everything in the description for you, so if you're someone that isn't interested in a certain book or a certain category, you can just skip over to the next thing. Jump around, jump up and get down. So Shadows and Whispers by Michael Jess Alexander. I read some work from Michael Jess Alexander before. I typically really like his short stories. This one is a svelte collection, so that like it's a collection of short stories, and it's a short collection, if that makes sense. It's not a massive amount of your time. If you want something that you can dip in and out of if you travel on the train and things like that, I think it would be perfect for that. If you have like limited periods of time to read short stories and you want to finish a whole story in one go, this is a perfect book for that. So I'm going to take you through the stories because it's just 5 stories in here, unless I've missed one. I think it's 5. So we got A Forest Haunt. I really loved this one. I think that this is my favourite in the collection. This is about a guy who finds a very odd closed circle of trees in this forest, and he chops through and gets through into the middle, like into a clearing. There's a cabin in there, there's a diary that's been left, and it turns out there's a reason for that circle of trees. And yeah, and then there are other people. I don't want to actually, I'm going to not spoil any of these books for you, so I got to be kind of brief when I talk about the short stories, obviously, is because it's too easy to spoil them accidentally. But I loved A Forest Haunt. Then we got Famished. This one wasn't my favourite. This was probably my least favourite in the collection, but I still did like it though. I would say this is about a hunger, and I'm a very eaty person, so I found that relatable. Elusive is next. So this is about a guy, Sterling, who something goes a little bit awry when he's in a prison transport vehicle and he gets away, and then it turns out there are worse things to be trapped in than a prison transport vehicle. A Slave to Love, this was another favourite for me. This is about a woman who is celebrating Valentine's Day with her love, who might or might not be a willing participant. And then we have On the Edge of Oblivion. This is a witchcraft story. I think this was the longest one in the collection, if I remember correctly, and this one had a really chilling element of the magic to it for me, so something is done. I wish I could tell you more, but I don't want to, again, it's kind of the crux of the story and I don't want to spoil it for you. But overall, I found this, it's a really quick read, really good ideas. Like that first story I thought would make a really great scary episode of something. It's perfect for the screen, and I really hope that someone somewhere adapts it, because normally I don't hope to see things adapted, because usually the adaptations are abominable. But yeah, I would love to see that. It was cinematic. But overall, yeah, it was as usual with Michael Jess Alexander, it was a strong collection of stories, and really enjoyed it. Number 2, I finally got around to A Bouquet of Viscera, which I have the paperback for, by Bridgett Nelson. Please excuse all of my little tab notes. Now, the first thing I have to talk about with this collection, I absolutely have to, is I don't know how well you're going to be able to make it out on my phone. I can never see how I've shown this to you until I watch it back. But the cover art is phenomenal, and it was Lynn Hanson did the cover art, and there's also interior interior of if this was a monetized channel, would that word demonetize me? I don't know. But yeah, it's a, you know, the edges look sprayed because of the interior artwork, the borders. It's a stunning looking book. There's a little bit of interior artwork here as well, sort of like the inside of a person, it looks like. It's absolutely stunning. I think this is my, I mean, I have a few books that are really interesting to look at. You know, Brom is a recent one I read, beautiful artwork, different type of artwork obviously, but I just think this is so beautiful. And yeah, Lynn, I would love to hire Lynn for all of my future books. She's a little bit out of my price range for good reason. She's absolutely amazing. But yeah, sorry, I had to enthuse about because I spent so long like just looking at all of the little details and stuff, and I just think it's a triumph of a book cover. So let's move on to the actual book. Now this is a 2-time Splatterpunk Award winner from 2023. So it won for Best Collection, and also one of the stories won Best Short Story. I'm so sorry, I can't remember which story it was that won Best Short Story. So this is more on the Splatterpunk side, although I'm always a little, I find it hard to talk about like what the level of splatterpunk elements are in a splatterpunk book, because I'm not a very seasoned splatterpunk reader. For me, I would say there is only one story in here that I couldn't read, and it was because of the subject matter, not because of the detail, but we'll get to that. So anyway, we'll go story by story again. So Auras, what a great opener. This is about a woman who has inherited a family gift. She can see people's auras, and the color of the aura tells you something about the person that I want to say, because it's fun to find out. And she also has a duty that comes with being able to seize this, so this is kind of like a gift with an obligation. And the ending it's really good. Next, Political Suicide. Okay, so this is about a doctor who's this is about a doctor whose son passed away because he was denied access to the medical care that would have saved him, or potentially saved him, because of financial reasons, and somebody is responsible for that decision. And then she actually finds herself in the position of actually being able to treat that person later on. So she's got, you know, revenge on the brain, and I did like it. It wasn't my favourite, because I think the only thing about this one for me that let it down a little bit was just that once you know what's going on, and it happens very early on, like this scenario with this doctor happens early, that's like the plot, like the main plot point of the story is what I've just told you. I found it a bit predictable. I was hoping there would be some like sting in the tail, or like extra twist or something that might happen, but I just found that it went exactly where I expected it to go. I don't know if that's because I read like 1,000 stories a year, and I've taken story analysis classes and things, so I don't know if that was me just like picking up on hints that Bridgett was dropping, or if maybe that's just what the story was. So I can't speak for everybody on that, because I haven't read reviews of that story in particular, but that was the only thing for me. Spores was the next one. This is about a guy who finds a new fungus, and it's a body horror story. Again, I think I found it a little bit like linear, like I was like, oh, this happens, but it was a good story, and I enjoyed it. I think what it was is because the first story does have quite the sting in the tail, and I really didn't see it coming. I think I was just expecting that going forward for all of the stories, but you know, it's not fun reading twist endings, I guess, when you're expecting a twist ending. So maybe that's what it was for me, like maybe this was like more my expectation. Next we had Invader. Oh, I really liked this one. This was about a girl who, a young woman who finds that she's been cheated on, and her boyfriend is sleeping with somebody else in her friend group, and she catches them, and not only is she sort of hit with that betrayal, and these people are not sorry for what they've done at all, but it turns out that the entire friend group knew about this the whole time, and so nobody clued her in, and you know, she gets a little revenge on the brain. And I thought, oh, I got a kind of idea of where this is going to go, but it didn't go where I thought it was going to go. It was way better. And the other detail that I really liked about this is that I was questioning, because we're sort of like seeing things through this woman's eyes and we're feeling like sorry for her because of the situation. I didn't realise until I was thinking about the story a bit later on that maybe she's not a great person. That doesn't mean she deserves to get cheated on, but I feel like there's a reason that everyone else in the friend group didn't care to tell her anything, and I thought that that was a really good character detail because it really serves the story like in the end. So I really liked that one as well. Then we had Cooked. I feel like Bridgett was seeing the future with this one. This is about the President of the United States teaming up with some rich guy who wants to microchip people for nefarious reasons. Reflections is next. This is about a serial killer with an honor code, kind of Dexter reminiscent, but this one had a good revelation in the ending, which I really enjoyed. Then there was Jinx. This is the one that I couldn't read, and all of the essay trigger warnings for this one. To be fair, Bridgett did do a full page right before the story warning you, do not go into this if these kinds of things can be triggering for you. I am not normally triggered by these things, so I thought, oh, for the purpose of reviewing, I'm going to read the story. I couldn't. I couldn't. And then last we got The Show Must Go On, which is a time-spanning murder mystery set in a theatre, and I had sort of Phantom of the Opera vibes from this, so I did like it. I thought it was a nice little closer. Overall, I would say this, I don't typically read splatterpunk. This wasn't too splatterpunk or extreme for me, generally speaking, apart from that one story, so I guess I would recommend this to sort of general horror fans. So yeah, I enjoyed it. Number 3. I'm going to have to refer to my notes for this because I don't have a book to hold up. Echoes in Dark Places by L.F. Shelly. I'm so sorry it's taken me so long to get around to reading this. If the author is watching this, this was a review request, and I'm so sorry. A little old me on my lonesome reviewing books for the channel and the site, so it does take me a while. So this is 13 tales, and I would actually say this is more like 15 because it's 13 tales, but sort of like bookended by a prologue and an epilogue, which is very unusual for a short story collection. You normally only see that in, you know, novels and novellas, and so usually, you know, you might get an introduction with a short story collection where the author is, you know, talking in a non-fiction sense about the stories. So I really liked the prologue. It really set the scene for the book. So like all of these tales are taking place in the same sort of area, I think, so maybe even the same town. I should have made a note to confirm that. I'm really sorry, but I didn't. And then the epilogue sort of seams everything together and acts as like a final move, like a final boss move or something. And I really enjoyed that. The stories themselves, I'm not going to go one by one because it's 13 stories, so it's a bit more, but I will say, so this book contains such horrors as fishing gone wrong, witches, forest guardians, human imitating monsters, which is very disturbing to me, ghost cowboys, things lurking beneath the snow, which I found very original. So the main thing, my main takeaway from this book and my experience of reading it was, there was a sort of more like old-fashioned narration style, which I miss, and I didn't realize hasn't been the contemporary trend for quite a long time. So normally when you're reading a third-person story, a lot of the time it's third person, but we're in the viewpoint of the protagonist, and so a lot of the time the prose reflects the opinions of the protagonist and the viewpoints and things like that. So even though it's a third person narrator that isn't the character, it's lending itself to the character. Stephen King is very famous for this, and I really enjoy that, and that's how I also write myself. This felt more like old school, like a completely sort of I don't know the word I'm looking for. I can't say the word I want to say. It's like an overhead narrator with no attachment to the characters, telling you a story around a campfire. And the feeling that I got was, if you ever watched Are You Afraid of the Dark, something like that, where the kids would gather, the teenagers would gather around the campfire and like throw the dust in, and this is the tale of the fish with no eyes or whatever. That's what it really felt like, was like a completely impartial narrator, like telling you a story like that. And I did wonder, like, where has that narrative style gone? Because I really like it. And yeah, I really enjoyed that about it. Yeah, there was a lot of your sort of like common tropes and subgenres, witches, monsters, things like that. But another thing that I really enjoyed was that the author found original ways to look at those well-worn tropes. So things like, you know, we've seen things like lurking beneath water, lurking in swamps, lurking beneath ice. I've never seen or read anything where there's something lurking beneath snow itself that someone's running through, though, and I really enjoyed that. So I think that this was written for an adult audience, and it suits an adult audience, but I also think that if you're somebody with like preteens and teenagers that want to get into reading horror, this is a perfect book, because we've got all of like the cool horror subject matter, creatures and themes and things like that, but the way that it's told would really lend itself very well to people who are like getting into reading, I think, as well, and it's not too extreme. So I feel like this is sort of age appropriate for quite a lot of ages. So yeah, often people ask me for recommendations for stuff for their kids, and I'm like, I don't know, because all of the stuff I read, if it's not like visceral gore and blood, which is not my kind of thing, usually like the themes or the subject would be like too heavy, whereas I think that this is like a good all-rounder. So yeah, I would recommend that as well. That was a fun read. Not my favourite short story collection of the year, but there was a lot of originality where I didn't expect to see it. So that was, yeah, I really enjoyed that aspect of it as well. Number 4, we've got A Season of Horrors, 4 novellas from Roland Blake. So this was an ebook as well for me. So yeah, like I said, 4 novellas, and I've got all my notes here. There will be written reviews, if there aren't already on the website, coming on the website. I just haven't written them all up or scheduled some of them yet, or some are scheduled and haven't come out. So we started with The Granton Witch. Now this was my least favourite in the collection, I have to say, and when I read it, please bear with me when I say this, I wasn't like excited to read the rest of the stories based on this one, but then as it turned out, I really enjoyed the other 3. So this is about a guy who picks up a woman who's on the side of the road, and he thinks that she's broken down in her car, and she's not quite what she seems. There's a history, and there may or may not be a killing spree on the horizon. So the reason I didn't like this one very much was just because I felt like it was too long for what it was. I felt like it could have really been sort of like pared down. There was a lot of repetition of things happening, like a lot of throats being slit, a lot, and it wasn't, I guess, you know, if that's kind of your part of your killing profile, fine, but it was just a lot of scenes of that, and a lot of scenes of yeah, just kind of like the same thing over and over. So I started to lose interest a little bit there. So yeah, that one wasn't my favourite. But then we moved on to Bestial, and this was such a weird idea. This felt like something that old school Stephen King would have written in a one of his collections. This is about a guy called Anthony who is in prison for murders he committed as a kid, and 18 years into his sentence, he gets his first visitor, and then we go back to 18 years earlier to find out what actually happened. And how can I can't really explain this one to you without spoiling it. It was such a shame. Hang on, let me think. he meets somebody who recognizes that he has a flair for a particular quite dark hobby for a child, the kind of hobby you would want to sort of condition out of them before it goes too far. But this person kind of, you know, doesn't seem to have an issue with it, and in fact offers this kid a tool to help with his hobby. And it's so weird. I would say like we're going into sort of like magical sci-fi territory with an element of this, but it is very much at its core still just a horror story. And it was, I just, yeah, loved it. It was so odd and original and terrifying to think of this thing existing and getting into the hands of the person that it's in. So that was a really fun story. And then we have The Clearing, which I think was my favourite. Oh yeah! Sorry, I had to check my notes. I remember the whole story now that I've just reminded myself. So, this is about two guys. Something goes wrong in a crime they're committing and someone is killed, and they flee to this sort of like remote cabin that one of them knows about. And this person was told about this cabin, but explicitly told not to bring anything bad to the cabin, and they do. And there are repercussions for this in a sort of like nature will take you down kind of way. And I can't really get into what happens, but they are trapped in a cabin, not by anything that you would ever think would trap them. And it was just great. It was just a great story. I really enjoyed it. It was kind of like karmic, but also did they all really deserve to be there? So there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on, but I just thought it was really fun, and they weren't characters making like really stupid decisions to try and get out of the predicament. They were doing the stuff that like the circumstances were forcing them to try. So I thought it was a really good story. If you enjoy stories about people like trapped in isolated settings with like some outside threat, this you probably like it as much as I did. And then the last one was The Taking of Jacob Sturridge. Now this one feels a bit cosmic to me. So this is about a guy who buys a painting called The Folly of Man, and then he starts hearing whispers and other creepy noises. Somebody turns up claiming that he's the artist and he wants the painting back, but that's not possible because the artist has been dead for years. And this guy sort of stubbornly said, no, I paid for this is my painting. And then possibly lives to regret that decision. So that it was a really creepy story that had that sort of like old school gothic horror flair to it almost, but like in a contemporary setting. And it was like a mix between like old school gothic atmosphere and storytelling sort of, and maybe something like out of the imagination of H.P. Lovecraft and Clive Barker's Love Child. So that's how I would describe that. So overall, I would definitely recommend that the whole book, even though I personally didn't like the first story. But yeah, based on the other three, I would definitely be happy to like actually buy it. It was a review request, but I am going to order a physical copy for my shelves, as I like to do when I enjoy a book. So we're moving on to non-fiction now, and I'm really excited. These are both by Bev Vincent, so I'm going to talk about them in turn. So this one is Stephen King, A Complete Exploration of His Work, Life and Influences by Bev Vincent. Now, Bev Vincent, you might have seen his name because he also writes shorts, novellas. I don't think he's published a novel yet, but you'll know him for shorts and novellas, and he also co-edited a aeroplane flight themed anthology with Stephen King called Flight or Fright, I think that's what it's called. I have it over there, but I forgot to grab it and I don't want to move now. So this is, as it states, a complete exploration of Stephen King's work, life and influences, and it goes chronologically through Stephen King's whole career, talking about every book up until 2022. So it's like, you know, apart from the last couple of things Stephen has released, when Bev put this book out, he was like up to date on everything, so it covers almost everything, and I'm in love with it. I I picked it up. I was having a bit of a stressful week when I was reading this, and it was a really great source of comfort to me to read for some reason. I love Stephen King. I've read everything that he's published, and before anyone starts, yes, that includes ebook exclusives and comics and things like that, and I thought that I knew everything there was to know about Stephen King because I'm kind of an obsessive fan, and I've read so much non-fiction about Stephen King, and I've read, you know, his autobiography / writing guide on writing. I've watched every single available filmed interview with him, talks that he does at universities, like anything you can find on the internet. I have watched it numerous times. I have a playlist of Stephen King stuff I like to put on in the background when I'm cleaning and things, and I just didn't think that there was anything that's public knowledge that I didn't know. And yet, Bev pleasantly surprised me with several things I didn't know, mostly about things to do with like adaptations of his work and things, and like the process of things, so that was really nice. I think maybe because Bev knows Stephen King in person and was able to get a lot of information from Stephen's assistant, and possibly Stephen, I don't know how he put this together, but yeah, there was a lot of Stephen King quotes in this book regarding his work, loads and loads of them actually, so that was a really nice element contained here that I haven't seen in other biographical works about Stephen King, because this one just felt more personal. This one felt like it was written by a very well educated fan who has respect for Stephen as a person and a human being as well, because he knows him. And yeah, great information, a lovely sort of like wholesome look at this amazing career, loads of detail, you know, it's not just like a little paragraph on each book, it's like a full page, sometimes 2 pages about each book he's released. It doesn't look big enough to have covered that much work, but it did. There's a nice little section about Stephen King's accident in there, which that's always been a real source of inspiration for me, how he overcame what happened to him and went on with his passions and things, because at the time that I read on writing, I had a car accident and I was like temporarily disabled, and I was kind of in that worrying about what was going to happen further down the line. Like there were things in my life that I had to give up, that I wasn't physically capable of anymore at the time, and yeah, so that was really comforting, and it was really nice to go over it here in with details I didn't know again. So I think this is an absolutely tremendous piece of work. If you're a Stephen King fan that's interested in this kind of stuff, the behind the scenes things, Bev Vincent is your guy. Like if you want someone who's really good at writing about this, like plenty of people have written great work, but I just think that this is the most comprehensive look at Stephen King's career that I've ever read, and I've read quite a lot. And then this one, Stephen King, His Life, Work and Influences, Young Readers Edition, is basically the same as that one, although I'd read this one like straight after that one. Lots of glossy pictures, stills from movies. That's also contained in the first edition, the big full one. You know, pictures of Stephen and things like that. Lots and lots to look at and things. But this has just been simplified a little bit in certain sections, so it gives like the same general overview of everything that's discussed here. It doesn't cut a lot out, it's just it gets rid of okay, so for example, the accident section. So in this book, there's a quote from Stephen King there about the difficulty of coming off opioids, because he was obviously prescribed things when he was in hospital, and as an addict that is actually a nightmare. If you're put on prescribed painkillers when you've been clean or you've come off things or whatever, that's like a whole new world of challenges and problems in your recovery process that other people might not have to deal with with so much difficulty if they're not already predisposed to addiction. And in this book, in the quote, Stephen describes like the actual feeling of withdrawing, whereas Bev just spared the reader that minute detail in the section in here, because it's, I guess it's not very age appropriate if you're talking to younger readers, and it's quite heavy. So I say that this is still a really comprehensive look at all of his work. It's just that Bev has taken care with his language and omitted some of the details that I think parents might not be happy for kids to be reading about yet. So I think this is, you know, if you have kids that have started reading Stephen King, or they, you know, they want a good sort of like professional role model, this is a great book. This was very charming. I loved it. So I didn't mean to talk as much about those, but I really loved them. They're some of my favourite reads of the year so far. Just got lost in a world of Stephen King, and it was lovely. So I said that there was one novel, there's 3 novels. So next up, The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. Now this is basically, this is a Dracula retelling basically, and homage and love letter to it. It's rather beefy. It's like 700 and something pages. I say beefy, like it's a bit longer than your average horror novel, but this is a historical horror novel, sort of. So, okay, so I didn't love it. I really wanted to. It was recommended to me by my tattoo artist, Chloe, so thank you for recommending this, Chloe. I finally got around to reading it, you know, 6 years later. So this is about a guy who has a professor, and they're interested in Dracula, and then the professor goes missing, and the guy thinks that maybe Dracula's real and had something to do with this, and then he's telling his younger daughter about it, and there's also this other woman. So there are a few characters. It's not as confusing as I'm making it sound. It, you know, there's plenty of time to get to know all these people here. It's not, you know, it's not a massive amount of characters, so we're jumping viewpoints between daughter and dad a lot of the time. Dad goes off on a bit of a mission. Daughter does not do as she's told and stay home. She's worried and she wants to go find him, and she has a companion for this as well. And then there seem to be darker forces. There's someone following the girl. We don't know what's going on with the dad. It's told somewhat in sort of like epistolary format, like the original novel is, but just not as broken up. So the daughter is reading these diary entries from her dad, but they you know, they're whole chapters, you know, we're talking like dozens of pages at a time. So it's not like broken up into like note, news article, things like that, but it does use that format. The things, I guess the things that I liked about it were, I did overall enjoy it. I'm glad I read it, but I probably wouldn't read it a second time. The things I liked were, I liked all the homage that was paid to the original novel. It's a different way of writing a Dracula story, because usually with a Dracula retelling, it's kind of, I don't mean to be disrespectful to people who've done this, but it's kind of same old, like we're focused on Dracula and then people are battling Dracula, whereas this was a lot more like keeping us in suspense about whether or not the legend was even actually true, and if it wasn't, what was true then. And it also, I think that I've seen other people complain about this, but this is also very true to the original novel, is that an actual Dracula character is barely seen, and people whinge about that, but Dracula films have made it seem like Dracula is way more like on screen in the book, whereas in the book he's kind of discussed a lot. They're battling him like behind the scenes, like he doesn't make many actual appearances in the book. It's more about the people who are like afraid of him and trying to figure out what to do, and like the consequences of what he's doing, and the effect that Dracula has. But Dracula the character is barely in Dracula, really. Like overall, like it's way more focused on the other characters, and that's obviously the same here. Also, I really liked the characters. I was most interested in the daughter's journey and the threats that were posed to her, and I really enjoyed all of her sections. I guess the downside to me why I didn't love this is that it just felt too long, and I like a big book. You know, my favorite books are It and The Stand by Stephen King. They're like 1,000+ pages in the case of The Stand, and 800 and something for It, I think. But I just I don't know, this just didn't feel like it needed to be this long. It was a lot of Dad and the woman he meets you know, going to libraries, finding archived things, speaking to people, getting bits of information. And I guess maybe I should have seen this coming, because it's entitled The Historian, so maybe it's going to read more like historical fiction. They tend to be bigger books with more focus on these minute details, but I'm just not someone who's very interested in history just as a general thing, and so I don't enjoy, like, I never enjoyed doing historical research myself, so this, I guess this just doesn't really appeal to me for the things that I don't enjoy. And and also I just didn't think that the climax was worth it for me personally. I felt like it was a really slow burn that I was hoping was going to be so explosive when we finally get to that last 100 pages, but it felt kind of like a something, and then which I guess is also very in keeping with the original novel of Dracula, because that's kind of that too. It's just that the overall novel of Dracula I just found more exciting just in general for the whole book, whereas this would have like moments of like, oh good, now we're getting going, and then it would like pull it back again. So yeah, I guess I think I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. I mean, it was a good book, glad I read it. My eyes did glaze over a little bit in some parts, but I guess this just isn't really for me, I don't think, because this was recommended to me when I was asking for vampire recommendations. There really isn't, you know, much vampire. Next, Myrhh by Polly Hall. I really liked this one, and the more time I spend away from it, the more I like it. So we've got 2 main characters. They don't know each other. Myrhh and Cayenne, I think is spelled like the spice. I think that's how I say it. And we're alternating, the chapters alternate between them and their viewpoints, and we're in first person for both of them. Hang on, are we? No, we're in first person for Cayenne and then third person for Myrhh, which I really enjoyed mixing up the narrative style for that as well. So Myrhh is looking for her birth parents, and she has this horrible little like voice in her head, like this horrible depreciating sort of voice that she calls a goblin. And then Cayenne is in what seems like kind of a loveless marriage. She really wants to have her own baby, but her husband's daughter, so her stepdaughter, lives with them, and the stepdaughter clearly does not like Cayenne, and like there's a lot of tension there. And you know, Cayenne's husband is always dismissing his daughter's horrible behavior towards her, and just, you know, excusing, dismissing, whatever. And so I had no idea what this story was, where it was gonna go, how anything was gonna like come together later. Further into the book we get a couple of other viewpoints as well, but basically these were female stories about neglect, I guess, being not is that right? These are female stories about people who are struggling with some quite like deep issues that don't feel heard, and they start taking things into their own hands a little more, like, but with that kind of trauma, the type of agency they start taking maybe necessarily isn't what they should be doing, or is it? It's just very, I found these characters very sort of like easy to understand even when I didn't agree with their decisions, and I was really fascinated. I think that Polly Hall, I've never read any Polly Hall before. I think that Polly Hall has done a wonderful job with characters here. It's very sort of like deep character study kind of stuff with a great climax. Like I was really enjoying the book, and then that really elevated it for me. I found it a really quick read thanks to the sort of alternating character POVs. I just couldn't, it was unputdownable. I really enjoyed it, so I would recommend this if you know, to people who enjoy that, like these kinds of stories. And then last up, oh god, how long have I been talking? Last up, Counted with the Dead by Peter O'Keefe. I really liked this one. So this, we've had a Dracula retelling. I would say that this is like a Frankenstein retelling. I don't know if that's how the author would describe this, but surely. So we have a guy called Jack. He's a dick. He's basically a hired gun, like a hired, kills peeps for cash, and life of crime and all of that. He has a brother that's also into this but wants out, and he's been out for a little bit. Jack takes out this guy Victor, who happens to be the partner of the woman that Jack loves, but she seems to detest him. And when they go back, Victor's body isn't there, and we do get this sort of like little section where we see people take the body, but just Jack doesn't know who took the body. And so the fact, and these people turn out to be sort of like, there's like a mad scientist type and his assistant, and they're doing stuff with the bodies and making things, and Victor is the one they've taken. So I just think that with that kind of story, and obviously this character is called Victor, I know that Victor is Victor Frankenstein in the original book and not the monster, but I feel like that was a nice little sort of like tribute, little Easter eggy homage there. So that's like part of the story, but there was like a lot more going on. Hi Loki, I wondered when you'd turn up. Hey buddy. Yeah, there's a lot more going on. So it's so weird. So weird, not in a bad way or anything, but just odd. Loki, please, I'm trying to talk about books. So there's a lot about Jack's sort of like criminal life here. There's a mob that Jack is in danger from, and then he's also dealing with the monster Victor, who has, thanks to certain things, all of his humanity may have been stripped away, and now he's pretty mad that he's been murdered, and he starts taking it out on Jack in... Oh no, get off. No, you go here on this little cushioned bit I made for you. Oh, what have you done? Loki's a heavy boy, and he just sat right across my laptop keyboard, which he knows he's not allowed to stand on, and I thought he'd broken it. Sorry about that. Anyway, what was I saying? So Jack's life of crime is very relevant here, because he's got this sort of outside threat of the mob, and then he's dealing with Victor, who's taking out his anger about being killed by Jack by targeting people in Jack's life. And so it was so interesting, because Jack is not a character that you root for. He's not like a sort of like black and white character, like objectively one way. Like, he's a layered character, but he's someone who, as a profession, decided to take up murder. And also, it's illustrated, he has a previous relationship and a daughter, and it's quite firmly established that up until recently he's been quite the deadbeat dad. He was a deadbeat partner, he's been a deadbeat dad. He's the kind of guy that now swoops in offering cars and things and just showing the mother up when she's the one who's been doing all the work all this time. And obviously most people wouldn't want their kid involved with their dad if their dad gets their money through dangerous crimes. So there was no point really where I felt sorry for Jack. However, the people surrounding him don't deserve the things that are happening. So it was just such a great morality tale, like a good look at, karma is kind of a grey area, really, because who does it affect and everything. And the monster stuff was great. Yeah, Frankenstein isn't my favourite of the classics, but I really enjoyed the elements that the author took out of it and used here. Again, contemporary setting. I personally could have done without the mob stuff, because I really don't enjoy crime fiction typically. It's just my preference. So it's something that is an area that I actively avoid, and when I enjoy stories that contain crime elements, I tend to be quite surprised by that, and it does happen. I didn't dislike those parts, but I didn't need them for the story, because my favorite parts of the story were just Jack's done something and created a monster out of it, essentially, or he's contributed, because if he hadn't killed Victor, none of this stuff would be happening. And I feel like the story could have just been that, but I read other reviews and people really love this mob element. Like, people who aren't like me and so stick in the mud about certain genres really enjoyed like the combination. I saw one reviewer described it as like Goodfellas meets Frankenstein, so I would agree. So it was a really fun read, and I like a novel that I've enjoyed more than others in quite some time, so I would recommend that to horror fans as well. I'm tired now, but I do have a word from today's sponsor, who's told me to get out while he talks to you. If you don't subscribe, I'm going to saw off Kaylee's head, put my own head on it, and then hand you down. What did he say? Something funny, I bet. Bleed.